Welcome back to the Messy Reformation. My name's Jason Rice, and I'm the Associate Pastor at Bethel CRC and Chaplain at Central Wisconsin Christian in Waupun, Wisconsin. My co-host is Willy Cronky. He's a member at Pease CRC in Pease, Minnesota. We're just a couple of guys who love the Christian Reformed Church and want to see Reformation happen in our denomination. But we realize that whenever Reformation happens in the history of the church, things get messy. And after the last couple of synods, and as we move into this rebuilding phase of the Reformation, things continue to be messy in the Christian Reformed Church. So we're taking the opportunity to have conversations with pastors and leaders throughout the Christian Reformed Church to find out what's going on in our denomination, but also to talk about what Reformation and rebuilding might look like. If you haven't already, take a moment to click subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. We're dropping episodes every single Sunday evening. It's also important for you to know that you are our marketing plan. We rely on you to spread the word about what we're doing at the Messy Reformation. We rely on you to share our content, and we also rely on you to give us 5-star reviews and provide good feedback for this podcast. You can also support us financially on Patreon or Substack. All the money raised is used to build the platform of the Messy Reformation. With all that said, we're going to get to this week's episode, which is part 2 of an update from the Messy Reformation team. And it's like, but it's not working. We're not there. So we need to figure out a better way. And so I'm just kind of poking on the side, I guess, saying like what we're doing is not working. Something needs to change. And I don't have the solution for that yet. On that note, let's talk about COD, Willy.
Yeah, let's talk about things we do have solutions to.
I'm just trying to keep my foot out of my mouth right now anymore, so you guys go right ahead.
No, I'm thinking, it seems like an awkward transition, but it does seem to fit as we're talking about steering the ship of the denomination. We believe that a big part of that is Synod. And one of the big conversations that will be coming up at Synod 2026 is that recommendation from the COD for biennial synods. And so why don't you give us some back information on that a little bit, and then let's have a conversation.
I'll go ahead and start with where this conversation initially started. It started with a task force recommendation that was realizing the denomination is running short on certain funds, and then how can we best steward the funds that we do have? And their solution to that came down to not having Synod every year, but having Synod every other year. And then the task force recommendation that Synod took up was kind of the idea behind that. And that was an interesting meeting to be a part of, and figures were called into question, I would say rightly and justifiably. I think we need to be a little more studious and good stewards on not just where our money's coming from, but even staff money during some of these, like the seasons of Synod. How are we paying staff? And then how many staff, how many offices, how many people do we have working remotely? But I found it interesting that the biggest thing that they came after was the gathering of the church, which to me, I think, I can say this, I think it speaks honestly to a low ecclesiology. And I say that because our Messy Reformation conference last year was on the doctrine of the church. So as we spent a lot of time thinking about the doctrine of the church, I think that's where some of these recommendations came from, is too low of a doctrine of the church. I think if we understand rightly that I don't buy into the notion that Synod has its authority because it's delegated to it. I think Synod has its authority because Synod is the church. And I think when you take that very seriously, then you understand that this is a necessity. It's not something that we get to do. It's something that the Lord has called us to do. And this is his church that we're talking about. And we're talking about, and not just his church on a broader level, but on local levels. All of us serve in some capacity in local churches. And I registered a negative vote for several reasons. First, it had to do with the notion that COD was going to continue to meet 3 times a year. That's twice in person, once over Zoom. But COD was only going to meet every 2 years. Well, that means in 2 years, Synod's only going to meet 1 time, but COD would meet 6 times. Well, if we look at that right there, then we say, how self-important have we made the COD? And I say that as someone who serves on the Council of Delegates for Classis Lake Superior. And I don't think that, and when I brought this to our classes and I was having lunch with certain delegates at classes, they were saying like, that's a really good point, actually. I didn't actually understand that Synod meeting less meant COD would meet probably more, or at minimum just as much. But again, is that where the authority should lie in our denomination? That speaks to some of this vision. I think some of the people who made the recommendations, they have a vision that I'm not in favor of. I'm not in favor of a Council of Delegates meeting 6 times every 2 years so that we can do the work of the church. The assembly, as we find it in Acts and throughout the New Testaments, are the one who come together to reason. And if you have a high ecclesiology that way, then I also think that you understand that the last 2 to 3 years of these gatherings coming together have been very hard for our denomination. Some would even call it very akin to a war. And I think a recommendation to have Synod every other year coming out of a war like we've just had is foolish. I think the time for biennial synods might come, but I think we are bare minimum 10 to 15 years away from that. I don't think the dust has settled from the human sexuality battles. And I don't think that we've actually elicited enough trust from our churches in our boards, our committees, and our institutions in order to go biennial. So that was the recommendation. Now you understand why I voted in opposition to it. So now I get to hear you guys back clean up again.
Well, I would hear, I want to hear from Dan, and just Dan, paying attention or listening out there. Do you feel like this has gotten any traction in the denomination, or what are you hearing?
I don't think it has. I think it serves a right. So COD is looking at it from the point of dollars and cents, and that's fair. I get that. I think it has the possibility of just flying through Synod and getting approved because it's relatively hard to get delegates to go to classes, let alone to get them to go to Synod. And so I think, again, in a low commitment situation, right? I don't even want to talk about trust right now, but just low commitment, low buy-in. And again, as I've another spreadsheet that Dan keeps, is the number of delegates from different classes. Last year, one of the classes closest to where Synod took place cannot send a full delegation. I'll leave that there. I want that to hang. However, that's a massive deal, right? And yet I don't, this is not something I hear talking about. When Willy shared it with our classes, by no mean was there oh yeah, this is rah, this is what we need to do. And I think it is. I think it's kind of coming out of left field, but I think it's one of those things that has the potential to fly through just because people are like, oh, good. That means I don't have to put my name up as often. So.
I think another thing that, at least that was on my mind, is these churches that feel really disconnected from, I'm just going to go ahead and say Grand Rapids, because that's where the main headquarters is. There's already enough disconnect between some of these other churches and the Grand Rapids office. And now I think a recommendation like this is only going to send a signal that there's going to be more authority and more work going to and coming from Grand Rapids. And again, I don't think that's a message that we want to send to our churches. I don't think that's a good way to build trust. And when I brought that to our classes, some people do feel really disconnected. Like Dan was saying earlier in the podcast, Lake Superior is a very geographically diverse classis. We have churches that are in the Twin Cities area. We have we have churches that are in a more rural area, like Emo, Ontario, or East Minnesota. And then we have churches that are, kind of in the middle. But all that to say is what these churches need right now more than anything is stability. And I also find it slightly ironic that we just held several events over the last 2 years called Gather. And now we're saying that we still want to gather as a synodical body, but we want to do it less. I don't think that's a message that we want to send to our churches. And I don't think that's a good way for them to actually place trust in our committees and our institutions.
Yeah. And I think even just to tie this into our last conversation, which is kind of why I went there, is like how do we get all of our churches and classes rowing in the same direction? Synod's a pretty good way to do that, right? How do we get our classes rowing in the same? We gather for classes, And so I think like by going to biennial synods, we're actually going to undo the possibility of bringing better unity and vision and focus and direction to our denomination. I think it'll and just on another practical aspect, like we were all at Synod 2022. Like we know like that taking a couple of years off of Synod is not good. I mean, yes, that was a little different. But still, it's just not good. Things build up. Politics happen more than when you have 2 years for people to kind of play games and do their thing. There's so many things. And I was curious because I have not heard one person speak positively of this. So that's why I'm kind of caught up. I'm like, I'm confused, to be completely honest, on how it passed COD. And, Willy, I don't need Willy to, share any secrets he can't share. But I'm like, how in the world did that get a majority vote at COD and maybe it's just I'm in different circles, but I have not heard one single person speak positively of this. So I think I've heard of a couple of overtures coming to kind of speak against it. So I hope there are some overtures coming to say like, hey, let's not go there. And that will help probably with what Dan was saying, that it doesn't just get passed under the table and people don't notice it. But boy, I think it would be the opposite of what we want right now. And if it's just a dollars and cents thing, there are so many different ways to cut dollars and cents. And I've got about 20 ideas that I could go through. I mean, not right now, but I've got a lot of ideas on how we could cut some dollars and cents to free up for Synod. And yet, Willy's heard me beat this like a dead horse over the years, but like one of the things I've talked repeatedly about is guess what you need to have to set a proper budget? You need to have a vision. You need to know where you're going and how you want to spend your money to get there. Otherwise, you just keep spending money all over the place. You have to have a goal that you're heading toward when you're going to write a budget. So if you're going to cut dollars and cents and you don't have a budget, you start cutting in all the wrong places rather than cutting in the proper strategic places for an organization. So I do think this is another evidence that we don't have a good vision right now, and we're making, I think, a poor decision. But I'm just blown away by that it being recommended. Yeah.
I think part of the reason why it was recommended and adopted by COD in a 2-to-1 margin has to do with the fact that when the question was thrown out, well, then what do we do? Then I think certain members of COD were saying, well, I don't really have a better idea. So I maybe just better affirm this. But my opinion is just because I don't have a better idea doesn't mean I can't vote this down and send it back to the task force, because it is your job. It's not my job to come up with an alternative idea on the spot.
The task force job. Yeah, you just shoot it down if it's a bad idea. That's how this works.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, okay, limit it to 2 delegates per classes. There you go. Like limit it to whatever. Like there's a million things you could do that would change it. Have classes chip in money to help cover some of that. I mean, oh my goodness, let's be real. There's a ton of different ways to cut costs on this that could make it happen every year rather than making it go every other year. And so I feel like that's just me shooting from the hip right now. So I think it's crazy. And yeah, it wasn't that long ago that we didn't have 4 delegates from every class that's going, right? And so that's a new thing. That's an extra cost. And so I feel like it's kind of wild that this is the thing. Shoot, we used to meet for 2 weeks. Not that it used to be a 2-week long gathering.
But that's the thing, right? I think this so much goes back to vision, right? If we have, like, there was an understanding of what synod was for back when they did the 2-week synods. They had way less business to do. Like, let's be absolutely clear. You can look back at the minutes. They are not near as long as they are now, or the acts of synod. But they had a reason for meeting for that long. The Synod of Dort back in 1618, 1619, a little bit off and on, but literally met for months, like, and for a purpose. And so when we're just like, no, we think we can go down to every other year, like, that is just, it's short-sighted. Again, as Jason said, I think there may be a time for it. We're not there. We're not there yet.
Maybe if, oh boy, get myself in trouble. But maybe if we cut a lot of the bureaucracy, we would have less business to do, and then maybe we can get down to biennial synods. But I have a feeling that if we cut our budget in a lot of the right places, we wouldn't be worried about not being able to afford synod as well. I know I get denominational employees who get upset at me for saying that, and that's not even me not appreciating denominational employees. Like, I do. There's quite a few denominational employees that I have a ton of respect for, and I appreciate the work that they're doing. They're doing good stuff. So don't hear that as a blanket statement, but there are places we need to cut. I forget, somebody did a comparison a couple of years ago at what our ministry share expectation is per member compared to like the PCA and some of these other ones. And we're like double. Like, we're smaller denominationally, and like our bureaucracy we're getting bloated. And so we need to like trim back. This is a normal aspect of renewal and reformation and revitalization, is you have to cut a bunch of things that have just kind of expanded. Everything expands, and then somebody eventually has to make some hard decisions to make some cuts. And I think that's where the season that we're at as a denomination, there has to be some cutting, and it's going to hurt. And it's not necessarily even like super personal. It's just like we have to make some hard decisions moving forward.
Well, what other trouble can we get ourselves into?
I mean, no, not going there.
I want to talk about a positive thing. How about this?
Go for it.
One of the most positive, encouraging things that I think has happened recently is Laura Copley being hired as the interim editor of the Banner. I think that is just super encouraging to me. That's a little bit of what I've been wanting to see for a long time, where we have somebody with I don't know, I'm not even going to try to be politically correct anymore, but someone with some of that abide DNA in more of an institutional position. And like, I think that should show people that we're getting there. Like, we're not there yet, obviously. Like, there's so many frustrations in a lot of different places. Like, but that was a good thing. And the fruit that it's already bore, right? I think the fact that Herb Scher got to write an article for the Banner, it brought me such a level of joy. Just like, I could read the article, I could hear Herb's voice in the background. I could super relate with him. Like, that's about the most relatable article I've read from the Banner in a really, really long time. And so I'm like, man, this is really good. And this is something that could help, again, maybe bring some good vision, maybe bring some unity, help us roll, rather than, oh boy, but rather than the Banner being the quote unquote kitchen table that sowed division and disunity, maybe the Banner could be a vision casting opportunity that like brings us in a direction and helps us see kind of the beauty of what it means to be Christian reformed. That just was super encouraging, and it gives me hope that There's other positions like the director of Reframe, the director of Reframe Media. That position's open right now. So I'd encourage anybody, if that's tempting to you, like get your name in there for that. Like hopefully we see somebody else good hired in that position, and that would be a big deal. And as these positions will continue to open up, and we need to have good people keep stepping up and filling them as much as they can. And the fact that Laura's in as editor of the Banner just gave me a lot of hope that we're moving into that phase of this Reformation.
Yeah, I mean it's a really good. I've skimmed Herb's article to this point, and I will say, like, from what I read, like, if you're again, I don't want to bring up Paul Vanderklay's name, but I will again. Herb was on with Paul Vanderklay a year or so ago, I think it was, and Herb, we've all hung out with him, some of us more than others, but Herb is a good old country boy from Iowa, trucker. Did he do pig farming too or no?
Yep.
You did. Okay.
Yep.
Like paint the picture there, right? He's the one in overalls at Synod, and his writing was eloquent but accessible. And I'm just like, wow, I did not know Herb had it in him to write like this. Like, so I like just to say, like, I mean, there are people out there that we have no idea in the denomination who have these gifts to write. And it's like, man, let's get them connected. But I will say, like, as hopeful as I am for Laura, and I think she's a great fit, great thinker, great prayerful woman, good at connecting people, right? It's going to take the support now of the abide-minded folks to use that, or people that want to stick with the direction of the denomination that we've set. It's going to take their support to go back with the Banner to make this work. And I will say, like, I've had some conversations in my area where people are like, what did Synod just do? Like, was this a good idea to fire or not to for Chong to be pushed out or for him to choose to have to leave, whatever way we want to paint that. But now I think Laura has a great opportunity in her leadership and with the rest of the staff, right, to hopefully create a place where people say, oh, this is what they wanted to do. Like, this is good. But it's also going to take those who have left reading the Banner long time ago to come back and to support that effort. So, to our listeners, like, again, if the Banner hasn't been for you for a while, please give it a look.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that would be my call to all of our listeners as well. Start reading it again, because I stopped a long time ago. And start reading it again. Give feedback. I know Laura well. I know Laura personally. She'll receive good feedback. She's good at listening. And we can continue to give feedback to her, and she's going to shape it. But she's going to need our prayer and support as much as we can, because I don't think it will be. I do think there'll still be an uphill battle, right? We know any organization, like, to change the culture of an organization, and the Banner is its own organization with its own little culture in it. I don't know this personally. I'm just assuming from the backside. So somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that the Banner has its own culture that's been shaped by the editor that's been there for a very long time. And just like any organization. And so Laura stepping into that is going to take a bit. And so she needs our prayer for sure, and our support, our encouragement, and whatever we can do to help kind of bolster and help get the Banner to the direction where we want it to be. Because I think it's still, that's why I've never been the proponent of let's get rid of the Banner. I've always wanted to revitalize it, because I think it can be a huge resource that could be a huge blessing to the church if it gets heading in the right direction. But we do have a ways to go yet. But I'm encouraged by that.
And I would say for anyone who is paying close attention to the landscape of our denomination right now, you've been paying attention over the last several years. You've maybe listened to this podcast or podcasts like it, and you have a mind for the church. You have a mind for, further casting vision into the CRC. It's kind of like we were saying, if you see some of these positions start opening up, or if you see a COD position opening up and it's in your classes, or another board or committee position opening up and it's in your region, I would encourage you very much, do it. Do these things. Because that's where a lot of this work, this behind the scenes work that we're talking about, bureaucratic or not, this is where a lot of the work is getting done. And it's in a lot of these meetings, and it is sacrifice. But we call it a crown of joy that we get to wear while we're doing the Lord's work. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and encourage anyone who is minded for things of this nature to go ahead and just say, "Here I am, Lord, use me." And I say that as someone who hasn't normally been really good at saying, "Here I am, Lord, use me." But then in the last few years, I've been prompted to serve on the committees I'm on, and by God's grace, He's sustaining me. And that's only happening through support and prayers of like my family and my friends, my brothers, and my church. So I thank everybody for that support, and that support will be offered to you guys too.
Yeah, I think of, maybe I'm going to speak out of turn. He won't want it said about him, but too bad. Sam Venheisen. So he's been a synodical delegate from Classis Lake Superior. He lives up in Brandon, Manitoba. Brandon is one of the far corners of our Classis Lake Superior. And I asked him in a meeting a couple weeks ago, like, what has made you be willing to come to classes, to be willing to go to Synod, to be willing to be involved with a committee? And he just shared, like, it's calling. Like, that's what it is. And I asked a more veteran pastor, like, what do you hear from him? And when you look at the CRC historically, like, does this work together? And I think the answer I got was, like, we've thought about calling as pastors, elders, and deacons, sure. But like the idea of serving the church more, the idea of literally the priesthood of all believers, everyone having a calling, being able to contribute to the church, we haven't done that well. Not in at least the 1900s type history. And so there's something right there to be regained. Like, this is not just about pastors and elders and deacons. We need all these positions working together, pulling in the right direction, heading towards the same destination. And so I appreciate Sam a lot. But yeah, I know there's more people. Brandon Seaver, Brittany Clark. There's plenty of people that we've had on this podcast, and I'm like, man, you're going above and beyond. And you don't have to be in your 30s or 20s to do that. Like, you can be 40s, 50s, and just be doing this for the first time. All the soccer moms out there listening, all the farmers in their tractors, I'm sure there's just a ton of them just harvesting, having us on in their headphones. Maybe not, but you have a place in the church. You have a place in the church and in the denomination.
Chad Workoven's got us set up on his for all of his farmers. They're listening to us while they're going away. So shout out to all you farmers around Worthington, Minnesota, listening to the Messy Reformation. We love you.
Well, even in Pease, Minnesota, the chair of my council listens to us when he's in his tractor.
Yeah, shout out to you too. We'll leave you unnamed for now. Protect your identity. But no, I would encourage people. This is super old podcast, but go back and listen to. I kind of threw together randomly a few years ago that live podcast in Sioux Center, Iowa. And nobody really knew what it was going to be about. And I kind of pulled out of my butt a talk about like Reformation throughout history and like some of the themes. And, one of the themes I mentioned, like Reformation throughout history has always revolved around renewal of the doctrine of God and the doctrine of man. Like, that's huge. But also the thing I emphasize there, it always has revolved around a renewal of the priesthood of believers. Like, that was huge. Calvin and Luther focused heavily on the priesthood of believers and how big of a deal that was. That was a big part of Reformation. And so I think we need to push into that a little bit more. And then even as I think about the conversation we just had today, really, which I didn't have in that talk, but maybe I'll add to it now, is like Reformation has also always required a renewal of ecclesiology. Because poor ecclesiology gets you to the place of losing your doctrine of God and man and a priesthood of believers. And so, like, we're in it, and And so I wanna see us keep diving into that. But I think you're right on the money, Dan. A renewal of the priesthood of believers would be huge for us. That would be a good focus for this year. Renewal of ecclesiology and the priesthood of believers. If we could focus on that for a year, that would be a good thing. And I think we probably have an opportunity to do a few roundtables on those topics.
I was going to say we got a few roundtable ideas that fit that.
Yeah, for sure. So stay tuned for those coming up as well. And then I just one more thing that popped into my mind to tailor onto that. Willy mentioned, kind of gave the call, if God's tapping you on the shoulder at all for any of these positions, do so. And I'll throw out there, back to the banner, if God's tapping you on the shoulder to write something, write articles, submit it to the banner now. And that's another way for us to influence that as well, and to try to get some good content in the banner. And I'm more encouraged. I had stopped submitting to the banner because everything got rejected. And so I was like, I'm done wasting my time there. But now we may be in a new season here where we can have good content there. So I would encourage people to keep writing and submitting articles there as well.
I think that's part of it, right? I think people, like, when we have these conversations about vision, a lot of it is people just don't know what to do, right? They don't know where to take their ideas, to take their hopes. And, again, I'm not saying we haven't done that, right? We've said in this podcast, like, if you have an idea, if you have a thought, talk to your COD rep, talk to your synod delegates, like, talk to your elders and deacons and pastors. And so I want to encourage that. Continue having these conversations. Like, we don't know everything that's going on out there, for sure. We don't know everything going on. And so, it takes boldness, right? It takes courageous leadership. It's almost like Jason has talked about courageous leadership before. But it takes some courage to step up. And so have that courage and, help shape the CRC to go another 150 plus years. Because if we don't have vision, like, it's really susceptible to fall apart quickly. And let's not do that.
Yeah, and I would call us to live into the idea that we'll be around for at least 150 years. Maybe showing my eschatology a little bit, but there you go.
Amen. Well, amen to being around for 150 years. Well, I'm not amening the ecclesiology of Willy Cronky. Maybe a round table for another day. We'll have our own little ecclesiology debate. Yeah. Well, good. Well, we're coming to the end here. We always give guests an opportunity for a final word. We are almost there, but let me give you each an opportunity to give kind of a brief final word for our listeners as we wrap this episode up. Dan, go ahead.
Dang. Pray for the church. Pray for its leaders. Yeah, I think one of the things, again, evidently I'm just exposing all the conversations I've had in private, but I look back to when I was a second clerk, and I remember Zach King just, like, appreciating the prayer of members of the CRC so much. And I appreciate that when people tell me in my congregation, like, hey, we're praying for you. We're waking up at this time every day, or we're waking up at this time every week, and we're praying for you. And I'm like, holy cow, like, thank you. And I just want to encourage that for Zach King, for Susan, for all the folks that we've named in this episode, but also those maybe who we struggle with, right? For Laura Copley. But all these people that are in these positions, calling is for them too. They have been called to these positions by God and by the church. And so let's pray for them as we seek to support them and see the vision that they have.
I'm going to tack onto that. I would say, I think what we've given in this podcast is probably a call to act. And I would say act boldly, act courageously, like Dan was saying, act prayerfully, and act in a sense that you understand you're under the sovereignty of God here. I would say we have a big God theology. And I think it's really time that we start living like that, praying like that, teaching like that, preaching like that, and serving in these positions like that. I think when we understand that we're holding on to Christ's promise that he's going to build his church and the gates of Hades won't prevail against that, then we're living not for victory, but we're living from a place of victory. And I think when we go forth and we're doing these things in the name of Christ, for the sake of his kingdom, for the sake of his name, and for the joy that is set before us, then we're going to do so with the blessing of God.
That's all we have for this week. If you want to help us out and support the Messy Reformation, another thing you can do is sign up for our newsletter through Substack. That way you'll get episodes and summaries sent directly into your email inbox. It also gives us the ability to communicate with our audience, which is one of the biggest struggles of a podcast. So head over to the Messy Reformation on Substack and sign up for our newsletter. But until then, don't forget this is Christ's church, and he bought it with his blood. And we've been warned that wolves will come in trying to destroy the flock. So keep a close watch on your life and on your doctrine. Preach the word in season and out of season, and keep fighting the good fight in this messy Reformation.